Welcome back, dear listener, to another soft-spoken descent into a time most have forgotten. Whether you're lying under quiet skies or drifting into sleep beside the buzz of a city streetlight, thank you for letting me whisper this story to you. And if this tale helps your mind slow down tonight, consider subscribing. There are still so many buried truths to unearth. Tonight, I'll take you into the heart of a forgotten warlord's legacy. A man who spoke little, fought like a ghost, and whose enemies vanished before his name was even spoken aloud. His story isn't in textbooks. You won't find it in school lectures. But it's as real as the cold steel he carried. This is the true account of a warrior called the Pale Horseman of the Red Gorge. He was born not in a palace, but beneath storm clouds, during a night when the wind howled so fiercely that mothers buried their babies deep in blankets and soldiers refused to patrol. A night, some say, the ground itself shuddered. And on that night, somewhere in the badlands of what is now northern Utah, a child was born without a sound. Not a scream, not a cry, just eyes wide open, watching, waiting. They called him Caldus, a name that meant nothing at first, just another dusty boy among buffalo hides and bone necklaces. But even as a child there was something wrong with him. Or maybe, something terribly right. He didn't speak. Not because he couldn't. He simply didn't see the point. He would sit at the edges of war councils, listening so carefully that even the chieftains grew uneasy. He learned not by words but by rhythm. The pull of bowstrings, the crunch of feet in dry grass, the breathing of horses. He watched when others were distracted, noticed patterns in bird migrations, in enemy movements, in the shifting weight of clouds before a storm. And when he moved, it was without hesitation. At age 9, he hunted and killed a coyote that had been terrorizing their horses. Not with a bow, with a stone. One blow to the temple, perfect aim. The warriors took notice, but they didn't praise him, they feared him. At 13, Caldus disappeared for a winter. Some believed he had died in the snows. Others claimed they saw him climbing the side of Skull Ridge alone, with nothing but a dagger and a fur. No one knows exactly what happened during those 3 months, but when he returned, he wasn't the same boy. His face was thinner, his eyes colder, and he had a necklace made of something none could identify. Bones, yes, but not animal. Some said they were the finger bones of a mountain hermit. Others whispered darker things. That winter had changed him. He didn't speak of what he'd seen. He didn't speak at all. But from that day on, he began wearing white into battle. Bone-white leathers, pale ash across his face. A death mark, the elders said. A walking omen. And when the raids began that spring, Caldus took his place at the front, not as a boy among warriors, but as the first to ride, and the first to kill. Caldus never gave commands. He didn't need to. Others followed him instinctively, as though drawn into his silence. In the chaos of combat, when screams and arrows filled the air, he was a stillness that moved. He didn't waste energy. Every motion was precise. His weapons were not beautiful, just deadly. A single curved blade, chipped but sharp, a wooden shield scorched from fire. He fought not like a man defending something, but like a storm devouring everything. There were reports, dozens of them, of entire enemy squads laying down their weapons when they saw him. And when he approached the battlefield, people swore the temperature dropped. Birds stopped singing, animals ran, something inside everyone just knew. This was not someone you could reason with. This was not someone you could run from. One of the most chilling moments in Caldus's legend comes from the siege of Black Hollow, a mining town turned fortress deep in the Rockies. The town had resisted the Pale Riders for weeks, confident behind their walls of iron and gunpowder. They had snipers, they had supplies, they had numbers. But one night, without a sound, their outer sentries vanished, just gone. No blood, no struggle, no sign. Then, their torches began going out one by one. When the townspeople woke the next morning, they found dozens of handprints in soot on the inside of their own gates, too high for any man to reach without a ladder. And hung from the clock tower bell, wrapped in their own uniforms, were 3 guards who had gone missing. Still alive, eyes wide open, but silent, paralyzed by fear. They would never speak again. Fear spread faster than bullets. The people of Black Hollow begged their mayor to negotiate. But by the time the gates opened, it was too late. Caldus didn't enter with fire or fury. He walked, alone, into the center square, surrounded, and still no one moved. His white clothing was stained from mountain ash. He carried no weapons in his hands, just a leather pouch. He reached into it and pulled out a single feather, blackened at the tip, and pinned it to the wooden post in the center of town. Then he turned and walked away. That night, the wind howled so violently that buildings cracked apart. The next morning, half the town was gone, literally gone. Their homes, their bodies, their animals, nothing remained but claw marks on stone and a single message scratched into the mayor's door. One warning, you won't get 2. From then on, the legend of the Pale Horseman took root far beyond the mountains. Traders whispered about him at border crossings, bandits abandoned roads he was rumored to walk, and neighboring tribes, some of whom had fought for generations, swore blood pacts just to avoid facing him. But Caldus wasn't interested in fame. He never claimed land, never raised a flag. He simply moved from place to place, answering violence with silence, destruction with control. The strangest thing? He never kept treasure. After every raid, every victory, every fall of a fort or a mansion, he would leave behind everything. Gold, weapons, horses, all untouched. Except for one thing, the books. He always took the books, journals, ledgers, diaries, and he burned some. Others he kept, carried in a bag across his back, as if looking for something hidden in ink. And then came the campaign that changed everything. The US military had taken notice. Reports of a silent warlord operating beyond the territory lines were flooding in. A special task force was assembled, not to negotiate, to eliminate. They sent 30 of their best into the Deadwind Canyons. Elite scouts, trained assassins, men who could kill without being seen. They never came back. A second wave followed. 24 men, gone. All that was found was a field kit, buried beneath stacked stones, and a single piece of parchment inside that read, "I do not seek peace, but I understand it." That message was enough to send shockwaves through the command. What kind of man writes something like that? After erasing 50 trained killers, by now his legend had outgrown even the harsh truth. Some claimed he was immortal. Others said he had no soul. But the truth, the part most people missed, is this. Caldus didn't kill for joy. He killed to balance something old, something buried. Historians believe he was following an ancient Scythian code passed down from nomadic shamans. A code that said, "When the earth begins to burn, send forth the Pale One." They thought it was metaphor, but what if it wasn't? What if Caldus had found something in the mountains during that winter of disappearance? Something that changed how he saw the world. Something that whispered to him beneath the snow. And now, dear listener, we arrive at the most terrifying chapter in this entire legend. The Night of Glass Rain. A wealthy rail baron named James Kittredge had established a private town in the Colorado desert. Armed guards, electric fences, steam weapons, the works. He mocked the rumors of Caldus, even offering a bounty for his skull. One night, the sky split open. A storm rolled in without warning. But it wasn't rain, it was glass. Shards, tiny and sharp, falling from the clouds like snow. The town awoke to screams. Roofs shattered. People ran. And in the heart of that storm, walking calmly through the slicing wind, was a figure in white. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't need to. Within minutes, the guards were down. Within an hour, the baron's mansion was burning. And at the center of the ash, there it was again, the blackened feather. Nailed to the stone, the Night of Glass Rain was more than an event. It was a message. It showed the world that even wealth, technology, and manpower couldn't stand against something older than all of them. Fear. The US government publicly denied it ever happened. Said the storm was a freak weather anomaly. Said Kittredge died in an unrelated boiler explosion. But witnesses, those few who survived with glass embedded in their skin, told a different story. They spoke of a white figure who moved without sound, whose presence bent the air itself. They said they felt their hearts pounding like drums long before they saw him. Some said they heard whispering, not in English but in a language they'd never learned. And then, nothing. Just silence, fire, and feathers. After that night, Caldus vanished. No sightings, no raids, just silence across the highlands and deserts. But then, the dreams began. Hundreds of people across the Great Plains started reporting the same vision. A pale rider galloping under blood-red skies, dragging chains behind him. He didn't speak in the dream, he just rode, always west. And everywhere he passed, the earth cracked, rivers ran backward, and children cried without knowing why. Psychologists called it mass hysteria. Historians didn't comment, but those who knew the legend, they understood. Caldus was on the move again, and this time he wasn't hunting men. He was chasing something deeper, something that had been calling to him for years, something buried in the salt flats. The salt flats of Nevada hold secrets no map can chart. Old bones, older myths, the kind of stories that were never written down because speaking them aloud was dangerous. But that's where Caldus went, alone. He arrived in the abandoned settlement of Stillroot, a ghost town no one had visited in decades. The town had been erased from every record after its population mysteriously disappeared in 1873. Locals believed the land was cursed. Animals refused to graze there. Birds wouldn't fly overhead. But Caldus didn't hesitate. He set up camp in the church at the town's center. For 7 days, nothing happened. Then, the shadows around Stillroot began to change. The building seemed to lean inward. The wind stopped, and strange symbols began appearing on the walls, scratched in with fingernails. Witnesses from a nearby trading post claimed they saw lights above Stillroot. Not lanterns, not fire, but columns of cold blue flame rising from the ground. Some said they saw figures moving, twisting, not walking, shapes that didn't quite make sense. The local sheriff sent a team to investigate. 5 men, all experienced, armed. They made it halfway through the town before their radios cut out. The only message that got through was a single word. He's waiting. When backup arrived the next morning, the search team was gone. Their weapons were still there, their boots, even their footprints in the salt. But not a single body. The only thing left behind was a white cloak pinned to the church door with a blackened feather. It was at this point that the government changed its approach. No more elimination teams, no more cover-ups. They sent Dr. Elise Ward, a psychological warfare analyst and symbologist, to consult. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't even field-trained. But she had studied ancient dream languages, trance cults, and migratory myth cycles. She recognized something that the military had missed. Caldus wasn't operating randomly. He was following a ritual path, one older than American borders, tied to constellations and bloodlines that had vanished long before modern maps. She begged the Pentagon not to confront him. Not yet. She said if they interrupted his path, they wouldn't just lose soldiers. They might lose something far worse, their grip on reality itself. But the warning came too late. A rogue contractor named Vassal, former Delta Force turned bounty hunter, took matters into his own hands. Armed with prototype weapons and a satellite team, he tracked Caldus to an abandoned mine shaft near Stillroot. What happened next remains one of the most classified incidents in US Black Ops history. All we have are pieces, a drone feed corrupted by static, garbled radio logs, and Vassal's final words transmitted through a cracked headset. He's not alone down here. The walls are breathing. The mine shaft later collapsed, swallowing half the hill. When a retrieval team dug through the rubble weeks later, they found only one item: Vassal's metal wristwatch. It had stopped exactly at midnight. The band was burned, as if by cold. At this point, Elise Ward went public. She risked her career and her safety to publish a paper called The Pale Cycle: Echoes of the Bone Oath. In it, she laid out her theory that Caldus was the last in a line of ancient warriors chosen to maintain balance between the waking world and something she only referred to as the below. Not hell, not death, but a memory too old to die. She claimed the white clothes weren't for intimidation. They were ceremonial, that the feathers weren't messages but warnings. Each town he visited, each raid he led, wasn't an act of violence. It was an attempt to close something breaking through, something buried for a reason. But the government labeled her unstable. She vanished soon after. Some say she went to Stillroot. Some say Caldus came to her. Now, years later, the sightings have returned. A man in white seen walking through ghost towns. Feathers appearing on windowsills during electrical storms. Entire flocks of birds freezing mid-flight, falling like rain over the desert. One trucker reported seeing a figure walking along the interstate at 3:12 a.m. No lights, no sound. Just the soft crunch of salt beneath bootsteps. And when the driver stopped to ask if he needed help, the man turned his head just slightly. The driver described his eyes as the color of a winter sky just before a blizzard. He didn't speak, just raised one hand, holding something. A black feather. The trucker never finished that haul, parked the rig and walked into the desert. They never found him. But perhaps the most disturbing piece of evidence came just last year. A video surfaced on a dark web forum, just 38 seconds long. It showed a quiet canyon at night. No music, no narration, just static and wind. Then, at the 30-second mark, a figure stepped into view from the edge of the frame, clad in white, moving slowly, and as he walked, the stars behind him blinked out, one by one, as if swallowed. There was no violence in the clip, no jump scares, just that silence, that impossibly heavy silence. Experts couldn't identify the terrain, but one linguist claimed the file name was an old dialect of Scythian that translated to, "He walks where time forgets." So now we're left with the question, who was Caldus really? A warlord? A ghost? A myth shaped by fear and desert winds? Or something far more ancient, wearing the mask of a man? He never claimed a kingdom. He never ruled an army. And yet his name carries more weight than kings, more silence than graves. Perhaps he is still walking somewhere, closing the old gates, chasing the echoes of the below. If you ever see a black feather outside your door during a storm, don't touch it. Don't open your window. Just listen. Because if you hear footsteps and no one is there, it might already be too late. And if you're hearing this, maybe you're part of the story now too. Tharok's sword was no ordinary blade, forged from a meteorite that had once fallen in the cursed plains of Nareth. It absorbed neither heat nor light. Its black edge shimmered with an eerie bluish glow under moonlight, and legends whispered that it could slice through time itself. When Tharok unsheathed it, A chilling wind always followed, as if the dead were being summoned from forgotten graves. This weapon, known as Velmora, had never lost a duel. Soldiers claimed that even the mere sight of it made their limbs go numb and their voices falter. Tharok didn't fight for honor or fame. He fought for a balance that only he understood. And Velmora was the price the world paid for its sins. Once, when a king tried to replicate the sword through alchemists, his entire city turned to dust overnight. No one knew how, except that Tharok's black feathered horse had been seen riding away from the burning ruins. The sword chose its master, and it had chosen death. On the night of the Crimson Eclipse, Tharok descended upon the Roman border outpost of Galanth. The guards, half drunk and basking in false security, were caught unaware. Within 30 minutes, 78 soldiers had fallen, each body found with a single clean cut across the neck. There were no screams, no cries for help, only silence, eerie and absolute. The campfire still crackled when Tharok vanished into the mist. Survivors claimed to see a shadowy figure walk calmly through flames that didn't touch his cloak. One soldier, found trembling and wide-eyed, kept whispering the same words. "He walks between seconds. He walks between seconds." From that day, no army dared camp in the plains of Vela. They called it the Dead Road, and even birds avoided flying above it. Rome had never known such fear, not from man, not from beast, but from something far older, something like Tharok. Whispers of Tharok traveled like plague through cities. Markets closed early, travelers abandoned roads, and temples burned black candles for protection. Even children began drawing his face in chalk, hollow eyes, no mouth, and a crown made of crows. Those who tried to burn these drawings found the ashes spelling his name in reverse. Scholars began to argue, was Tharok a man, a ghost, or the last curse left from an ancient war? A secret Roman council known as Umbra Solis dispatched a priestess named Althea to locate him. She was born under a lunar eclipse and trained in forbidden magic. If anyone could reach Tharok, it was her. She followed blood, smoke, and forgotten songs that only the cursed remembered. At every village she visited, the same tale echoed. He punishes pride. He listens when no one speaks. He waits in the stillness between your breaths. The deeper she went, the colder the nights became. Even fire refused to burn in Tharok's land. Althea finally found the path Tharok walked, a winding trail of withered trees and silent wells where wind never blew. She lit a lantern enchanted with dragonglass, but its light flickered constantly as if afraid. As she walked deeper, voices from the trees began whispering her name. "Althea, return," they said. "He remembers you." But she had never met Tharok, or so she thought. At the edge of a dead lake she saw him, standing motionless, eyes closed, sword buried halfway in the frozen ground, crows perched on his shoulders as if he were a throne of stone. She approached cautiously, but the moment her foot broke a twig, his eyes opened. Not glowing, not red, just cold, eternally cold. "Why do you seek me?" he asked, but his lips didn't move. The words echoed inside her skull, shaking loose old memories she never knew she had. Memories of another life, where she had betrayed him. Tharok remembered everything. 1,000 years ago, Althea had not been a priestess. She had been a queen, and he her sworn guardian. In that past life, she had sacrificed him to the gods for eternal power. His body was left on the altar of betrayal, but his soul had not ascended. Instead, it had turned black and wandered until the sword Velmora found him in the afterrealm. Now, reborn through rage and cursed winds, he stood again, no longer man, no longer bound by time. Althea collapsed to her knees, the memories flooding her with guilt so dense she could barely breathe. "I didn't know. I didn't remember," she gasped. Tharok stepped forward, the snow around him melting into blood. "You came seeking to stop me, but you only returned to finish what you started." He raised his sword slowly, not to kill, but to show her what she had truly created. Her scream that night tore the clouds apart. Word spread that Althea never returned. Only her staff was found, broken in half and left at the edge of the dead lake. But something else had changed. For the first time in centuries, the moon turned black on a clear night. Oceans rose, birds flew backwards. Even the sun flickered like a dying flame. Seers proclaimed that the balance had been shattered, that Tharok no longer punished the wicked. Now he punished everyone. Villages untouched by war burned to cinders. Entire armies disappeared overnight, with only their banners left behind, folded neatly in silence. The wind howled in foreign tongues. Bells rang by themselves. One desperate king sent his son to offer peace. The boy returned with white hair and hollow eyes. He spoke only one sentence. "The debt of betrayal is not yet paid." Panic overtook empires. Kings gathered, forming a grand council beneath the Temple of Dust. The greatest minds, prophets, and warriors assembled, but none had answers. They uncovered scrolls from ancient tombs revealing Tharok's true name, Valdurin, the keeper of lost oaths. It was written that only one thing could stop him: the memory of pure love, unbroken by time or betrayal. But such a thing hadn't existed in the world for over a millennium. A single idea surfaced. If they could find someone born without sin, who bore no memory of pain, perhaps they could awaken that lost emotion in Thurrock. Thus they searched for a child born under the Vale Moon, the rarest night in all of time. Far away, in the village of Ellesmere, a child named Cale was born during the Vale Moon. His eyes were pale blue, almost silver, and he never cried, not even as an infant. The winds whispered softly around his cradle, and the crows that once followed Thurrock circled above his home in silence. Cale grew quickly, but something about him remained untouched by the world. Innocent, still, otherworldly. When soldiers came to take him to the temple, his parents wept, knowing he might never return. As he left, the fields around their house turned white with frost, though it was midsummer. Cale did not speak a word during the journey, but when shown a sketch of Thurrock, he gently touched it and whispered, "He's waiting for me." The meeting between Thurrock and Cale happened on the final day of the year, beneath a sky filled with falling ash and frozen stars. No guards, no priests, just the child and the shadowed warrior. Thurrock stood still, his sword buried beside him. Cale approached without fear. The crows didn't move, the wind didn't blow, and then Cale reached up and placed his tiny hand on Thurrock's chest. For a moment nothing happened. Then Thurrock's armor cracked, just slightly, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. A tear not of sorrow, but of remembrance. Deep within that ancient soul, a spark ignited, a feeling forgotten for centuries. Not forgiveness, but something close. And in that spark, the storm began to calm. The world didn't change instantly, but the skies cleared. The dead wind stopped whispering. Thurrock turned from the boy and walked away, sword left behind, buried in the ice. Villagers who had feared him now saw only a man, tired, broken, and finally at peace. Cale returned home in silence, carrying nothing but a black feather. Thurrock was never seen again, but legends say he still wanders the far edges of the world, not to kill, but to watch. And wherever cruelty rises again, the earth grows cold, and the sound of a sword being drawn is heard in the wind. Thurrock turned from the boy and walked away, sword left behind, buried in the ice. As Thurrock emerged from the whispering cave, the silence that had accompanied him was now replaced by murmurs, soft, unintelligible chants that floated around his ears. The sky had turned an unnatural hue, a bruised purple with veins of black stretching across it like cracks in reality itself. The trees around him began to move ever so slightly, though there was no wind. It was as if the forest had begun breathing. He clutched the sword tighter, now feeling the faint pulse within its hilt. The blade was not a weapon anymore. It was a living entity, feeding on the fear that surrounded them both. Suddenly, a rustle from behind. Thurrock turned swiftly. A figure cloaked in red stood at the edge of the clearing, motionless. Its face was obscured, but its presence was chilling. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, in a rasped voice, it said, "The door to the throne of thorns has been unlocked." Thurrock did not understand, but the weight of those words settled in his bones. The figure began to retreat slowly, vanishing into the fog as if it had never been there. Thurrock stood still, unsure whether to follow or flee, but something within him had shifted. A force, ancient and commanding, was now tied to him. The sword hummed low, like a lullaby sung in a graveyard. He turned and began walking, not by choice but as if being guided by invisible hands. The forest seemed to rearrange itself before his eyes, trees moving silently to form a narrow, winding path. Shadows danced alongside him, whispering secrets in dead tongues. The air grew colder, denser. He reached a clearing, and there, half buried in the earth, was a broken statue of a crowned king, its eyes hollow, but its mouth wide open in eternal scream. Thurrock reached out to touch it, and in that instant he saw flashes. Fire, blood, chains, and a city buried beneath sand and bone. Thurrock stumbled back, gasping, the visions clawing at his mind. He felt something warm trickling from his nose, blood. But there was no time to react. From the woods emerged a sound, wailing, high-pitched and pained. A woman? No, something far older, pretending to be one. Then, crawling into the clearing on twisted limbs came the Moksha, a creature once human, now cursed to feed on memory. Her eyes were stitched shut, but her mouth grinned wide open, filled with blackened teeth. "Give me your yesterday," she hissed. Thurrock lifted the sword, but the Moksha recoiled, not from the blade, but from the mark now glowing on his palm. It had appeared when he entered the cave, and now it pulsed, sending out waves of heat and warning. The Moksha screamed and retreated into the dark, leaving behind the stink of decay and desperation. Shaken but not broken, Tharok pressed onward. His path led him to the forgotten ruins of Nilgath, a city swallowed by forest and myth. It had once been a capital of knowledge, where kings walked with spirits and oracles spoke in blood. Now, it was just broken stone and eerie silence. As he walked between the fallen archways, voices began whispering again, calling his name, but not from around him, from inside him. He fell to his knees as memories that weren't his began flooding in, a war fought in the skies, a betrayal beneath a sacred tree, and a child burning with blue fire. Then a voice, deep, feminine, timeless, spoke directly to his soul. Your blood is not your own. You carry the air of the forgotten. Tharok's heart froze. What did it mean? Who was he really? A low rumble echoed through the ruins and the ground trembled. From beneath the cracked stones, hands began to emerge, skeletal, clawed, desperate. The guardians of Nilgath were awakening. They were bound to the city, protectors in life, cursed in death. Their hollow sockets glowed faintly with the same eerie light as Tharok's sword. He stood still, unsure if they would attack. But instead of advancing, the guardians bowed slowly, their bones creaking. One of them stepped forward, placing a rusted crown at his feet. It was ancient, thorned, and pulsing with power. Tharok understood. He was being chosen, not to rule but to remember, to carry the burden of a forgotten legacy and awaken what had been buried for centuries. As his fingers closed around the crown, lightning cracked across the sky. Time seemed to distort. He was no longer in the ruins. He stood atop a dark mountain surrounded by endless night. Before him rose a massive gate made of ribs and black stone. Carvings of torment and sacrifice adorned its surface. It was the Door of Thorns, spoken of only in forbidden scrolls. Tharok's breath fogged the air. The gate began to groan, slowly opening, revealing a corridor lit by blood-red fire. Every step he took now echoed like a drumbeat through forgotten realms. He knew this place was a realm between life and death, a test, a trial, and a truth. And at the end of it, something waited, watching. The corridor twisted as if alive. Shadows danced along the walls, whispering secrets meant for gods. Tharok passed murals painted with blood, showing stories of kings who turned to ash and gods who cried black tears. His own story was on one of the walls. Him, holding the sword, standing before an army of faceless beings, his heart pounded. This was fate unraveling. At the end of the corridor stood a mirror, tall, cracked, and weeping ink. He stepped before it. The reflection was not his. It was of a boy, scared, frail, running through a burning village. That boy looked up and whispered, "Don't become him." Then the glass shattered. From behind it emerged the Echo King, a being made of shadows and regrets. "You carry my pain," it said. The Echo King was massive but thin, like a skeleton draped in darkness. He floated rather than walked, his limbs bending unnaturally. "You were never meant to be a warrior," he hissed. "You were forged." Tharok gritted his teeth. He could feel the truth clashing inside him. "Who am I?" he demanded. The Echo King reached out, and from his touch, a flood of memories filled Tharok's mind. He saw himself being created, not born, in a circle of flame surrounded by whispering monks. His mother's face was a blur, and his father's hand held a dagger. He wasn't human. He was a vessel, a weapon, a prophecy in flesh. The Echo King laughed. "You are the end and the beginning." The cave trembled again. Tharok fell to his knees. His chest burned with the weight of knowledge. The sword at his side now pulsed violently, responding to the truth revealed. The mark on his palm extended up his arm, glowing like molten gold. The Echo King raised his hand to strike, but Tharok, with renewed fury, swung the sword. It didn't cut flesh. It severed existence. The Echo King screamed, not in pain but in relief, and dissolved into a cloud of ash. With his last whisper, he said, "Set them free." The corridor collapsed behind Tharok. He now stood in a void. No ground, no sky, only stars swirling around him, and a voice from all directions whispering, "Awaken the Thorns." A platform of light appeared beneath him, and slowly, forms began to emerge. Ghosts of kings, soldiers, children, forgotten by history, walking in silence. They encircled him, bowing. Tharok stood tall, the crown still in his hand. He placed it on his head, and from within him burst a beam of light so blinding it split the void. Realms far away stirred. The world began to remember the name Tharok, but his journey was far from over. Ahead lay the Thorn Throne, atop a mountain of bone and memory, guarded by time itself. As he took his first step toward it, the sword whispered one last question. "Are you ready to remember what you were built to forget?" The underground chamber echoed with a faint chant, as if the stone walls had memorized every sorrow that had ever touched them. Tharok moved deeper into the hall, where time seemed suspended. The air was still, yet his cloak rustled without wind. In the center of the chamber lay an obsidian slab, etched with blood-red symbols that pulsed with a rhythm, like a beating heart. As he approached, the slab responded, vibrating slightly beneath the touch of his breath. A whisper echoed in the air, not from any mouth, but from the very stone. "You carry the sin, but do you carry the price?" Tharok hesitated. His hand instinctively reached for the dagger at his side, but the moment he touched it, the lights in the room dimmed, and the entire chamber began to descend like an ancient lift. He wasn't alone anymore. Shadows gathered at the corners, watching him with eyes that didn't blink. They weren't spirits, they were memories, alive and hungry. The descent stopped with a jolt, and a loud metallic clang echoed through the hollow pit. A set of twin doors, engraved with the image of a weeping sun, opened before him. Beyond them was the Room of Truth, a cursed space spoken of in riddles by dying monks and blind seers. It was said that inside, time shattered, and every lie a man ever told turned into a blade pointed at his soul. Tharok stepped in. Immediately the walls came alive with scenes from his past. His mother's death, his brother's betrayal, the screams of the village he failed to save. He couldn't look away. The images began swirling, merging, distorting until they became one, a throne made of bones, and atop it himself. But the version sitting on the throne wasn't him. Not entirely. Its eyes were red, its skin cracked, and its voice echoed from the depths of the forgotten. "You are me, the king born of death." Tharok fell to his knees. Was this his destiny? Suddenly the ground trembled. Cracks formed beneath Tharok's feet, releasing foul black smoke that rose like serpents. The chamber was alive and angry. The shadows from earlier slithered toward him and began forming a circle, chanting in tongues lost to the world. From their center emerged a figure draped in ancient bark and bone, the Watcher, the one who judges all those who enter. Its face was hidden by 1,000 hands, each covering its mouth and eyes. "You seek what lies beyond the final gate?" it rasped. "But have you buried your humanity?" Tharok didn't answer. His heart was no longer afraid. The Watcher raised a long finger, pointing toward a new door rising from the stone, one sealed with living roots and bleeding iron. "Beyond this, there is no return. Speak your truth or rot in silence." Tharok took a deep breath and spoke a name, the name of the one he still loved, still feared, still hoped to save, Yavina. The door cracked open with a scream. Yes, a scream, not of metal, but of something sentient. As it split, the light beyond wasn't golden or divine. It was blood-red, pulsating like a womb. Tharok stepped through. The space on the other side wasn't a room, but a memory given form. He stood in the ruined village where his love Yavina had perished. But everything was frozen in time, the fire hanging in midair, the people screaming in silent horror. He walked past them all, toward the center, where Yavina knelt, her hands over a child. But this time, she looked up at him. She saw him. "You never came back," she said softly. Tharok's heart twisted. "I tried," he replied. Her eyes shimmered with pain, and something worse, betrayal. "The blade you carry was forged with my life." And then, with a tear running down her cheek, she faded into ash. The illusion collapsed. Tharok stumbled forward into pitch-black nothingness, then a spark, then 100. Tiny lights appeared, swirling like fireflies, forming symbols around him. He was now inside the final corridor, the realm of the forgotten vow. Here, only one truth was allowed to survive. His sword began to weep. Yes, actual black liquid dripped from its edge, reacting to the space. From the darkness rose the voice of the ancient king who created the blade. "Every soul you've slain resides within your weapon. Do you still wish to wield it?" Tharok looked at the sword. It pulsed, twisted, trying to resist his grasp. "Yes," he said firmly. "They scream, but they gave me strength." The corridor lit up in flames, revealing a colossal gate made of bone and bronze. A voice whispered, "Then face the mirror of death." In front of the gate was a standing mirror, tall, cracked, and breathing. Tharok saw his reflection, but it was distorted. The man in the mirror smiled with crooked teeth and burning eyes. "I am you, unchained." Suddenly the mirror shattered from within, and the reflection stepped out, solidifying into a duplicate of Tharok, only darker, faster, and without mercy. The battle began. Steel clashed against steel, but the real battle was deeper. Each strike brought back memories, doubts, regrets. Tharok's blade trembled with every swing. The dark Tharok laughed. "You're fighting yourself, fool!" Blood sprayed. Tharok fell. But just as the shadow lifted the killing blow, the real Tharok whispered, "I accept you." And in that moment, the shadow vanished in a flash of blinding light. Acceptance had broken the curse. Breathing heavily, wounded but alive, Tharok stepped past the fallen mirror and approached the final gate. As his fingers touched the bone and bronze door, it crumbled like ash. Inside was a throne, not of power, but of judgment. Before it knelt a small child, covered in chains. The child looked up. It was him, a younger version, crying, afraid. "Will you kill the last of your innocents?" asked a voice above. The throne's crown hovered in the air, glowing with divine agony. Tharok paused. For all his strength, all his vengeance, he couldn't bring himself to harm the boy. He knelt, touched the child's face, and said, "Live, grow stronger than I did." The chains broke. The throne shattered. A new path appeared, one without blood but full of shadows yet to come. He emerged from the chamber, not the same man who entered. The forest had changed. The trees now bent away from him, whispering his name with reverence and fear. The sword he carried no longer felt cursed. It felt earned. But in his heart, he knew that something had followed him. The ancient door may have closed, but its echo remained lodged in his soul. Birds refused to sing around him. Children stared at him with wide, unblinking eyes. He returned to his village, only to find the people bowing, not out of respect, but out of dread. A seer approached and whispered, "You've seen the mirror of death, but did it see you too?" Tharok had no answer. He walked past them all into his home and stared into a bowl of water. Behind his reflection, something smiled at night. Dreams no longer came gently. They arrived as storms, visions of collapsing worlds, burning skies, and a voice calling out from the void, "Open the gate again." Tharok knew his journey wasn't over. The curse was never truly lifted. It had only evolved. The blade at his side had begun to glow again, this time with a blue flame. He tried to bury it once. It returned the next morning, lying beside him. Ravens circled above wherever he went. One night, he awoke to find his bed surrounded by salt rings drawn by unseen hands. Written on his wall in blood, "We are awake." He clenched his fists. If the darkness wanted a war, he was ready. But deep down he feared something worse. What if he was the darkness now? And so Tharok walked again. Through fire, through storm, through memory and madness. He was no longer a man seeking redemption. He was a being carved by truth, sharpened by pain, and crowned by death itself. Wherever he went, stories followed. Of a warrior with a bleeding sword, eyes like cold stars, and footsteps that silenced even the wind. But behind those tales was a deeper legend. A forgotten prophecy. One that spoke of a man who would become the gate between the world of the living and the dead. Tharok's path was sealed. His name, cursed. And yet somewhere, far beyond time, a woman waited in a place between dreams, whispering his name not with fear, but with hope. For even cursed men deserve a final choice, and his was yet to come. As Tharok stood beneath the blood-stained moon, his body battered, spirit torn, but soul awakened, he realized that the curse was never about the sword or the village. It was about the darkness every man carries within. The whispering stairs had not taken his life. They had taken his past, his weakness, and replaced it with truth. Behind him, the temple burned in silence, and the spirits that once haunted the land had vanished like mist in sunlight. Tharok looked up at the dawn sky, where the first ray of light touched his face. It was not redemption he had found, but rebirth. Without a word, he turned and walked into the forest, not as the cursed warrior who entered, but as the guardian of silence, the last keeper of the stairs that would never whisper again. The tale ends, but the silence remembers, always. If those whispers gave you chills, just wait till you hear the screams in the next story. Like, subscribe, and turn on the bell before the stairs call your name next.